Give your talk, but that's the kind of issue that I think you might be able to help us with.
Well, possibly. Let's see. Oh, well, can you all hear? Thanks very much. Okay, well, my position is a bit anomalous. I used to be a lecturer in medical ethics at Imperial College London. I teach moral philosophy generally now. And I'm going to begin with a platitude, but I shall try to defend the platitude. Obviously, there are very powerful arguments on both sides of this debate, just as there are with many other biomedical issues like abortion. Very powerful arguments. And I'm not saying that just for the sake of it, but it's true. Both sides can appeal to principles that in many areas of application are used by morally decent and intelligent people. Moreover, the debate has run for so long that well-informed proponents of either side, or if there are just two sides, are usually familiar with the arguments of the opposing side. I've been to many debates like this at this very festival. Usually comes up. I think most good faith people are aware of what the other side says. So most of those who favour the possibility of the permissibility of assisted dying typically will say that it can be, even if only rarely, the only way to relieve intolerable distress and fear, and that the person in such distress who hasn't got any other way to relieve it is entitled to ask for assistance from a doctor, and the person or the doctor asked is entitled to accept or refuse that request. That is often said. Now, those against often point to slippery slope arguments, and they're a can of worms in themselves. But some people will add, and I think this has to be brought out because it's often not mentioned because it's difficult to debate, that very often these slippery slope arguments are a kind of smokescreen for the moral conviction, hard to articulate in a secular society, that it is just absolutely morally wrong deliberately to take innocent human life, and that even when the motive is beneficent, such as in this case, it's just wrong to take an innocent human life, even if that person consents. That's a fundamental issue that probably we won't get to. People tend to stick to slippery slope arguments. So usually each side admits the prima facie strength of the other side, but here we get the disagreement. For some reason, each side of this thinks the weight of the argument comes down on their own side. Hence, there emerges a disagreement. But now, here's where it tends to go wrong. Or not so far, but often in debates I've witnessed. Each side now really needs to say why the considerations it adduces in its own favour outweigh the considerations adduced by the other side. Because we can all agree that there are people in terminal distress who would benefit from assisted dying. I mean, I'm using benefit controversially, but, whose distress would be alleviated by it. And we can all agree there are slippery slope concerns. Many people point to what's happened in Belgium and the Netherlands, for example, and what happens there. Not just when the law is abused, but when the law leads to the formation of new laws that are more permissible. That actually is something not mentioned. And reading that recently led me to think carefully about my own position, which had been quite pro before that. And then those against the bill don't deny there are cases of terminal suffering that can't be relieved by palliative care. So how do we go? Are we just going to say, this is how I feel, this is what seems more salient, or do we say it's actually irresolvable? I mean, I have to admit, I don't like sitting on the fence, but I do tend to on this debate. I tend to oscillate, I've flirted with both sides, but I am a fence sitter, I think. And I'd be grateful if maybe somebody in this room can topple me off that fence. Let's hope. But then what you can do as a philosopher, at least, is, very briefly, is just, to look at good and bad arguments. If, for example, you hear people saying, "Oh, the doctor's life is to save life, not to save life, not to take it." Well, that's just question begging. The whole question we're asking is whether the doctor's life ought to be, on occasions, to take life, just very rare occasions. So that's rhetoric. We need to probe that. If we do slippery slope arguments, well, there was a debate on this in this room exactly a year ago. We had to be clear about their structure. That 1 minute. Be clear about their structure. If you accept that there is something bad at the top of the slope where we are now, i.e. there are people in terminal suffering, incidentally, I know such a person. He's currently starving himself to death. He has Huntington's disease. He's going to get worse. He wants to die before he gets to advanced dementia. So there are terrible things where we are now. Now, the force of the slippery slope argument is to say, once we do something to alleviate those rare cases, we will end up doing more evil. There'll be involuntary euthanasia. You have to say, first of all, you have to talk about the likelihood of making a full descent by the slope, and you have to make a comparison between the evil at the top of the slope and the evil at the bottom. You have to do the thinking, in other words. We shouldn't be tear-eared about it. I agree with what Rosie said in the first week. People are people. Emotions are appropriate in moral reasoning. It would be dreadful to be in a position of the person I know in that position. But I wait to be persuaded on either side. So thank you.